5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Chairman Cartwright. I appreciate you and Ranking Member Adderholt for holding today's hearing. Ensuring that our justice system is operating effectively and efficiently in accordance with the law is essential, and I appreciate the Attorney General, his appearance before us today to discuss the department's funding request. I'll go out of order in my questions briefly just to address the burden on immigration judges. I would posit that it is a direct result of this administration's changes in policies and put in place a catch and release program, repealing of remain across the border while their asylum claims are being heard, the numerous policy changes that have incentivized individuals to make this journey with small children and claim asylum when for no other reason other than they are trying to escape poverty. Now, that is a reason to explore legal immigration process and reforms, but I would argue that it is not cause for asylum. And I would argue that before we grant a significant increase in funding for immigration judges, we need to see some recognition by this administration that it is first indeed a crisis, and secondly, that they are taking steps to address this crisis by restoring some order to the border and some structure to enforcing our border. I want to ask the Attorney General, in the past, GAO has estimated that the department has not collected most of the outstanding criminal debt, both fines and restitution, due to, among other factors, the nature of the debt and a lack of coordination between relevant DOJ components. My last report was that it was under a 5% collection rate. That is abhorrent. At the end of fiscal year 2016, DOJ had identified $10 billion of outstanding collectible restitution debt. So as you come asking for an increase in budgeting, is collecting this debt a priority for the department at all? And is DOJ adequately measuring its criminal debt collection performance against any established goals?
Well, certainly bringing in the money that is owed is very important to the department. This problem of debt collection has been a problem for since the last time I was in the Justice Department, and I certainly will draw my attention to this again. Of course, the restitution issue doesn't go to the government; the restitution goes to the victims. But I will certainly look at this question. The more money we can bring in from people who owe us money, the less money we would need from you. Although, again, I don't believe the debt goes directly to the Justice Department, but to the Treasury as is appropriate.
I appreciate that. Shifting over to another topic. Last year, we saw an unprecedented and overwhelming number of firearms sales, and with those sales, an unprecedented increase in checks run through the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. In fact, the one-year increase from 2019 to 2020 alone was nearly 40%. In your opinion, does NICS have the necessary resources to handle what I'd imagine is continued strain on the system? And can you provide the committee with the latest stats on the percentage of background checks that fall into, rather than proceed or denied status, delayed status, and the percentage of those checks that are then resolved within 3 business days, 10, 30, and 88 business days when they're purged from the system?
Well, Congressman, you're absolutely right that the more sales there are, the more pressure there is on NICS to do the background checks. Obviously, absolutely right. We have in FY21, we received $168 million for expanding NICS capacity and to address the workload increases for FBI and ATF. So we have resources that we're now being able to put into this problem. I don't know the statistics. I know the issue that you're talking about. I don't know the statistics on how long a delay there is and whether it's satisfied within the 3-day proceed window.
Well, if you could get those to us, I'd appreciate that.
Of course, and we will do that.
I'll just ask one more question. Current law requires a prospective buyer of a firearm to provide a photo ID to exercise this core constitutional right. Would you argue that that is a reasonable requirement?
I would, but I don't know what the requirements are. Again, this is slightly beyond my area of expertise, and I'd have to look into what the requirements are.
Well, 26A on the form requires a valid government photo ID. So,
well, there you have it. Then that's the answer.
And you would argue that that is a responsible requirement.
I would.
Would you also argue that to exercise your constitutional right to vote, that requiring a photo ID, government issued photo ID, would also be a reasonable requirement? I'm sorry, you're muted, sir.
I'm sorry. I think I may be being muted by the subcommittee every time a member speaks, but we're doing the best we can here. So,
I appreciate that.
I'm sorry.
Would you consider that?
Yeah. So the question on voter ID is what kind of disparate impact it has on voters of different races, colors, and language groups, and whether it violates the Constitution by having a disparate impact on people's ability to vote. The Supreme Court has held that voter ID as a concept is constitutional. And the issue is what, in any individual case, does the records show about whether it deprives certain groups protected by the 14th Amendment right to vote. That's the question. It's not a question of whether voter ID is sensible or not sensible. It's a question of how it impacts and what the cost of that impact is, and what.
But you don't ask that question for a Second Amendment rights when they're purchasing a firearm.
I think you
Mr.
would.
Cline, we're going to have a second round of questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. At this time, the chair recognizes Congressman